As night settles in and the noise of the day slowly fades, the body begins to let go of the outside world. Breathing softens, muscles loosen, and awareness gently turns inward toward a place that feels familiar yet endlessly mysterious. In this quiet transition between wakefulness and sleep, something subtle begins to happen, something that does not announce itself loudly, but unfolds naturally, as if it has been waiting patiently all day for this moment of stillness. The eyes close, the world disappears, and yet the mind does not fall silent. Instead, it drifts. Thoughts soften, boundaries blur, and consciousness slips into a state where time no longer follows rules, where logic loosens its grip, and where images, memories, and emotions begin to rise on their own, without effort or intention. Every night, without instruction and without resistance, the human brain enters a space where entire worlds can exist without physical form, where faces appear without bodies, where places feel real without having a location, and where experiences unfold without ever happening in the external world. This is the space we call dreaming. Dreams arrive quietly. They do not ask permission. They do not explain themselves. They simply happen, carrying us through moments that can feel vivid, emotional, confusing, comforting, or strange, often leaving us with a lingering sense of meaning even when the details fade away. For centuries, dreams were seen as messages, prophecies, warnings, or glimpses into something beyond the waking mind. But today, science offers another perspective, one that is no less fascinating and perhaps even more profound, because it reveals dreams not as mysteries sent from elsewhere, but as natural expressions of the brain doing what it does best when the world grows quiet. Tonight, we will take our time. There is no need to hurry, no need to understand everything at once. We will gently explore what dreams are made of, not in symbols or interpretations, but in the language of the brain, the chemistry of sleep, and the slow rhythms of neural activity that guide the mind through the night. This is not a journey meant to stimulate or excite. It is a quiet exploration, one designed to unfold gradually, allowing curiosity to remain soft, attention to remain relaxed, and rest to come naturally as understanding deepens. So as you settle in, allow your thoughts to slow, your breathing to steady, and your focus to drift comfortably. There is nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to solve, and nothing you need to hold on to. We are simply here to ask, calmly and patiently, what are dreams made of? If you find comfort in slow ideas, quiet questions, and gentle journeys through science and the unknown, you're welcome to stay a little longer here. By subscribing to Theories Before Sleep, you allow these calm explorations to return each night, softly and without interruption, offering a space where curiosity can rest and the mind can unwind before sleep. Dreams do not begin at the exact moment sleep arrives, and they do not appear suddenly or without preparation, but instead emerge gradually as the brain slowly changes the way it communicates with the world, loosening its attention to external sounds, physical sensations, and conscious control, while turning its focus inward toward internal rhythms that have been repeating quietly for millions of years. As the body settles into rest, the brain moves through a series of carefully organized stages, each one marked by a distinct pattern of electrical activity, breathing rhythm, and chemical balance. And although these stages feel seamless from the inside, they represent profound shifts in how the mind processes information, memory and awareness. In the earlier stage of sleep, thoughts still drift in familiar ways, sometimes echoing fragments of the day, half-formed ideas, or fleeting images that feel almost intentional, as if the mind is gently rehearsing the act of letting go, testing the boundary between being awake and being asleep, without fully crossing it. As sleep deepens, awareness becomes less anchored to the physical body. Muscle tension fades, heart rate slows, and the brain's communication with the outside world grows quieter, not because it shuts down, but because it deliberately chooses to listen less, filtering out unnecessary signals in order to conserve energy and maintain internal balance. It is only later, after the brain has passed through deeper non-REM stages, that dreaming truly begins to take shape, most vividly during a phase known as rapid eye movement sleep, a state in which the brain becomes highly active once again, not unlike wakefulness, while the body remains deeply still, protected by a natural paralysis that prevents the physical acting out of imagined experiences. During this phase, the eyes move gently beneath closed eyelids, breathing becomes irregular, and the brain generates complex patterns of activity across visual, emotional, and memory-related regions, creating the conditions necessary for dreams to form, even though the sleeper remains completely disconnected from the surrounding environment. Dreams arise precisely because of this unique balance, where the mind is awake enough to generate experiences, but detached enough to do so freely, without external input, logical oversight, or physical consequence, allowing images, sensations, and narratives to emerge on their own terms. The brain does not decide to dream, nor does it wait for a signal from consciousness, but instead follows internal biological rhythms that evolved long before language, culture, or conscious reasoning, rhythms that ensure the mind continues to process, reorganize, and adapt even while the body rests. In this state, the senses that normally anchor us to reality grow quiet. Vision no longer depends on light, sound no longer depends on air vibrations, and touch no longer requires physical contact, leaving the brain free to generate its own internal version of reality, built entirely from stored information and emotional context. This is why dreams often feel immersive rather than observed, as if the dreamer is inside the experience rather than watching it unfold from a distance, because the same neural circuits used for perception during waking life are activated internally, creating sensations that feel immediate and convincing. Dreaming begins, then, not as a random event, but as a natural consequence of how the sleeping brain balances activity and silence, connection and isolation, control and freedom, entering a state where experience continues without the need for the outside world. And it is within this carefully tuned state, where awareness drifts without direction and the mind explores without purpose, that the raw fabric of dreams begins to form, quietly, steadily, and without effort, setting the stage for everything that follows throughout the night. As sleep deepens and dreaming draws closer, the brain does not simply fall offline, but instead makes a series of deliberate choices about what information is no longer necessary, gently reducing its attention to the external world in order to protect rest and maintain internal stability throughout the night. The first thing the brain begins to release is continuous sensory monitoring, the constant scanning of sound, light, movement, and touch, that keeps us oriented during waking life, slowly turning down the volume on these inputs so they fade into the background, becoming distant, muted, and eventually irrelevant. Sounds may still reach the ears, but they are no longer prioritized, processed only enough to detect danger, while everyday noises are ignored entirely, allowing the mind to drift without interruption, free from the need to respond or react. Visual processing also changes, not because the eyes stop working, but because the brain no longer depends on external light to construct experience, shifting instead toward internally generated imagery that requires no physical input and follows no spatial rules. At the same time, the brain reduces its connection to the muscles of the body, activating a protective mechanism that temporarily prevents voluntary movement, ensuring that imagined actions remain internal, even when dreams feel vivid, emotional, or intense. This physical stillness is not weakness, but safety, allowing the brain to simulate experiences freely without risk, while the body remains at rest, conserving energy and maintaining balance. Equally important is what happens to conscious control, as the regions responsible for planning, judgment, and decision-making grow quieter, loosening their influence over thought, allowing ideas to flow without evaluation or correction. This is why dreams do not follow logic, why contradictions are accepted without question, and why events unfold without concern for cause or consequence, because the part of the brain that normally asks, "Does this make sense?" is simply not involved. As these connections fade, the brain enters a state where experience is no longer guided by intention, but by association, emotion, and memory, moving freely between ideas based on how they feel rather than how they fit together. What remains active is not awareness of the present moment, but a deeper layer of mental activity, one that reflects how the brain organizes meaning, resolves emotional tension, and integrates experience beneath conscious thought. By letting go of the outside world, the body, and logical control, the brain creates the conditions necessary for dreams to emerge, not as distractions, but as natural byproducts of a mind allowed to wander without boundaries. In this quiet release, dreaming becomes possible, unfolding gently in the space left behind when waking awareness steps aside. There is no single instant when a dream officially begins, no clear boundary that separates thought from dream, but rather a gradual shift in which the mind slips from loosely connected ideas into fully formed experiences without ever announcing the transition. At first, images may appear faint and unstable, fragments of faces, movements, or places that drift through awareness and dissolve just as quickly, carrying no story and demanding no attention, as if the brain is quietly warming up its internal systems. These early images are not yet dreams, but precursors, the raw signals that indicate the mind has entered a state where imagination can unfold without interference, where memory and perception begin to merge. As the brain settles deeper into this state, activity increases in visual and emotional regions, allowing these fragments to connect, stretch, and stabilize, slowly transforming into scenes that feel coherent even when they make no logical sense. What was once a fleeting image becomes a setting. What was once a vague feeling becomes an emotion with direction, and without conscious decision, the mind places itself inside the experience. This is the moment a dream forms, not through intention or design, but through the natural synchronization of neural activity across regions that rarely communicate so freely during waking life. the brain begins to simulate reality, drawing from stored memories and emotional states, weaving them together into an internal environment that feels continuous, immersive, and complete. There is no awareness that this environment is constructed, because the mechanisms that normally distinguish imagination from perception are quiet, leaving the experience to be accepted as real in the moment it occurs. Time behaves differently here, stretching or collapsing without notice, allowing long narratives to unfold in seconds, or brief moments to feel extended and rich with detail. The dream does not announce itself as a dream. It simply becomes the present moment. Once this shift occurs, the mind is no longer drifting but participating, moving through experiences that feel immediate and meaningful, guided not by reason but by emotional relevance and associative flow. Dreams form, then, not as stories the brain tells, but as realities it temporarily inhabits, created effortlessly when the conditions of sleep allow imagination to take the lead. From this point on, the dream unfolds on its own, shaped by forces deeper than conscious thought, quietly carrying the mind through landscapes that exist only for the duration of the night. Once a dream has formed and the mind has fully entered its internal world, the brain begins to construct experience using materials that are already deeply familiar, even if they no longer feel recognizable in the moment, because nothing in a dream appears from nothing, and nothing is created without reference to what has already been lived. Every image, sound, movement, and sensation that appears in a dream is assembled from stored fragments of memory, perception, and emotion, quietly drawn from the vast archive of experiences the brain has collected over time, whether they were noticed consciously or absorbed without attention. Faces that appear in dreams are not inventions but recombinations, built from features the brain has encountered before, sometimes blending expressions, shapes, or movements from many different people into a single presence that feels new, yet carries an unmistakable sense of familiarity. Places in dreams follow the same principle, emerging not as accurate copies of real locations, but as layered constructions, combining elements from different environments into spaces that feel complete and navigable, even when they could never exist in the physical world. A staircase might resemble one from childhood, while leading into a room shaped like a place visited years later, lit with a quality of light, remembered from somewhere else entirely, all held together by emotional continuity rather than spatial accuracy. Sounds and voices also arise from memory, reconstructed by the brain with remarkable precision, allowing conversations, music, and ambient noise to feel vivid and present, even though no external sound reaches the ears. The brain does not play recordings, it recreates experiences, and it does so using the same neural pathways responsible for perception during waking life, which is why dream sensations can feel so convincing, immersive, and real. These building blocks are selected not by logic or relevance to the present moment, but by emotional weight, meaning, and association, with memories that carry unresolved feelings or strong impressions more likely to surface and shape the dream environment. Dreams are therefore not reflections of daily events in order, but reorganizations of experience based on how those experiences were felt, allowing the brain to explore connections that are rarely examined consciously. In this way, dreams become spaces where memory is flexible, identity is fluid, and meaning is assembled intuitively rather than deliberately, forming experiences that feel deeply personal without being intentionally designed. The materials of dreams are ordinary, but the way they are assembled is anything but. In dreams, memory does not follow the order in which events occurred, nor does it respect the boundaries that separate past from present, because the brain, when asleep, is no longer concerned with organizing experience chronologically, but instead focuses on how memories relate to one another emotionally and conceptually. Moments from childhood may appear beside recent experiences. People from different periods of life may interact as if they belong together, and places that were never connected in reality may merge seamlessly, not because the brain is confused, but because it is operating under a different organizing principle. During dreaming, memory becomes associative rather than sequential, meaning one idea leads to another based on similarity, emotional tone, or symbolic relevance, rather than on time, logic, or factual accuracy. A feeling of stress may call up a memory of a difficult conversation, which then blends into a place associated with uncertainty, eventually transforming into an entirely new scenario that carries the same emotional quality without directly referencing its source. This is why dreams often feel meaningful, even when they make no sense, because the connections they form are emotional rather than logical, reflecting how experiences are processed beneath conscious awareness. The brain treats memories not as fixed records, but as flexible elements that can be rearranged, modified, and integrated, allowing it to test new associations and reduce emotional intensity by placing experiences in different contexts. In this state, memories lose their labels. They are no longer clearly marked as then or now. They simply exist. This blending allows the mind to revisit experiences without re-entering them exactly as they were, softening their impact while still preserving their significance. Dreams do not replay the past, they reinterpret it. By removing the timeline, the brain frees itself to explore meaning without constraint, gently reshaping experience in ways that support emotional balance and psychological flexibility. Memory without timeline is not chaos. It is adaptation, and it is one of the quiet mechanisms through which dreams do their work. In the dreaming mind, emotion does not simply accompany experience, but quietly guides it, shaping scenes, directing movement, and determining which memories rise to the surface and which remain dormant, making emotion not a background element of dreams, but their primary organizing force. When the brain enters deep sleep, regions associated with emotional processing become especially active, allowing feelings to influence the construction of dream environments in ways that are rarely possible during waking life, where logic, routine, and attention often suppress or override subtle emotional signals. This is why dreams are rarely neutral. They are often charged with feeling, whether that feeling is calm, tension, curiosity, fear, longing, or relief, even when the events themselves appear ordinary or abstract. Emotion acts as a compass, guiding the flow of the dream without the need for narrative structure, pulling the mind from one scene to another based on emotional continuity rather than cause and effect. A sense of unease may transform a familiar place into something unfamiliar. A feeling of comfort may soften sharp details and slow the pace of events. A moment of joy may expand into a prolonged experience, while moments of distress may repeat or intensify. The brain is not asking what the dream means, it is responding to how it feels. This emotional architecture explains why dreams often center on unresolved experiences, lingering stress, or deeply held attachments, not as messages to be decoded, but as processes unfolding naturally as the brain attempts to regulate emotional intensity and restore balance. During dreaming, emotional memories are revisited in altered forms, allowing the mind to engage with them at a safer distance, reducing their impact while preserving their informational value. This process does not require awareness. It does not require interpretation. It happens automatically, quietly, and efficiently. Emotion builds the structure of the dream, selects its contents, and determines its tone, creating experiences that feel deeply personal even when their details are unfamiliar. Dreams are not driven by logic. They are shaped by feeling. And in this way, emotion becomes the architect of the dreaming mind, guiding it gently through the night. Dreams feel real not because they are accurate, but because the brain experiences them using the same systems it relies on to experience the waking world, engaging neural pathways that evolve to interpret reality, not to question it, allowing imagined events to be processed as if they were happening in the present moment. During dreaming, the visual regions of the brain become highly active, generating images with depth, movement, and detail, while the areas responsible for evaluating accuracy and consistency grow quiet, removing the internal checks that normally distinguish imagination from perception. As a result, the brain does not label the experience as fictional, it simply receives it. This is why a dream environment can feel immersive and convincing, even when it contains impossible elements, because the brain is responding to the experience itself rather than assessing its validity. At the same time, emotional centers amplify the significance of what is happening, deepening the sense of presence and making reactions feel immediate and genuine, whether they are calm, excitement, or fear. The body may remain still, but internally the mind reacts fully, producing emotional and physiological responses that mirror waking life, such as changes in heart rate or breathing, even though no external action is taking place. This internal realism is reinforced by the absence of competing sensory input, as the brain is not balancing internal imagery against external sights or sounds, allowing the dream to occupy the full field of awareness without interruption. Without an external reference point, the internally generated experience becomes the only reality available, making it feel complete and self-contained. The sense of self within a dream also feels natural because the brain regions involved in identity and perspective remain active, placing the dreamer inside the experience rather than outside it as an observer. There is no sense of watching a story unfold, there is only participation. Dreams feel real because neurologically they are processed as real experiences, even though they leave no physical trace. They are realities created temporarily by the brain, experienced fully, and released without consequence. And it is this convincing quality that gives dreams their emotional power, allowing them to influence mood, memory, and perception long after waking. One of the most striking features of dreams is not what happens within them, but what does not, because while images, emotions, and sensations remain vivid and active, the part of the mind responsible for questioning, analysing and correcting experience grows unusually quiet. During dreaming, the brain regions associated with logical reasoning, self-monitoring and critical judgment reduce their activity, not because the brain is malfunctioning, but because these functions are temporarily unnecessary in a state designed for internal exploration rather than external decision-making. This silence of logic explains why contradictions pass unnoticed, why impossible events feel natural, and why the mind accepts situations that would immediately trigger doubt during waking life, because the internal voice that normally asks whether something makes sense is simply not present. In this state, the brain does not evaluate experience, it allows it. Without constant analysis, the dream unfolds smoothly, uninterrupted by skepticism or self-awareness, enabling the mind to move freely between ideas, identities and environments without resistance. This absence of logical oversight also means that emotional reactions remain unfiltered, responding directly to what is perceived without moderation, which is why dreams can feel emotionally intense even when their content appears abstract or symbolic. The silence of logic is not a flaw, it is a feature. By quieting the analytical mind, the brain creates a space where association can replace evaluation, allowing memory, emotion, and imagination to interact without constraint, producing experiences that would be impossible under waking consciousness. In this space, the mind is not trying to understand, it is allowing itself to experience. Dreams require this silence in order to exist, because analysis would disrupt the fluidity necessary for their formation, breaking the continuity of the internal world before it can fully unfold. And so, logic steps aside, not as a failure of reason, but as a temporary surrender, giving way to a different mode of awareness, one that values feeling over explanation and presence over certainty. Even as logic fades and the external world disappears, the sense of being someone does not vanish, because the brain maintains a quiet continuity of self, allowing the dreamer to experience events from a personal perspective, rather than as a detached observer watching images pass by. In dreams, identity is fluid but present, anchored not to biography or memory, but to perspective, the simple sense of, I am here, moving through an experience that feels immediate and personal, even when the details shift without explanation. The dreaming self does not question its surroundings, nor does it reflect on its own existence, because self-awareness in this state is experiential rather than reflective, focused on participation rather than observation. This is why the dreamer rarely notices inconsistencies in their own identity, accepting changes in age, role, or ability without resistance, because the self in dreams is defined by presence rather than history. The brain regions involved in maintaining a basic sense of self remain active, ensuring continuity of experience, while those responsible for self-reflection and evaluation remain quiet, allowing identity to adapt effortlessly to the demands of the dream environment. In this state, the self is not thinking about itself, it is simply being. The amplified form of identity allows the mind to explore experiences without the constraints of ego, expectation, or narrative coherence, enabling emotional processing to occur without the interference of conscious judgment. The dreaming self exists only for the duration of the dream, dissolving upon waking, leaving behind impressions rather than memories, sensations rather than stories. Yet while it exists, it feels complete. Dreams do not require a stable identity to feel real. They require only a point of view. And as long as the brain provides that perspective, the dream continues, carrying the dreaming self quietly through experiences that feel both intimate and transient, meaningful and fleeting. Beneath the images, emotions and shifting scenes of a dream, a quiet chemical balance shapes everything that unfolds, guiding the tone, intensity and fluidity of the experience without ever entering awareness. Because dreams are not only patterns of thought, but also carefully regulated chemical states. As the brain enters the phases of sleep most closely associated with dreaming, the levels of certain neurotransmitters begin to shift, altering how neurons communicate and how information flows between different regions of the mind. Chemicals that normally support alertness, focus, and critical reasoning gradually decrease, creating a mental environment less concerned with accuracy and control, while others associated with imagination, memory activation, and emotional processing become more influential. This shift allows the brain to move freely between ideas, forming connections that would feel unusual or illogical during waking life, but which feel entirely natural within the dream. The reduction of chemicals linked to stress and vigilance helps soften emotional responses, while the increase of those involved in internal signaling strengthens imagery and sensation, allowing experiences to feel immersive without becoming overwhelming. The brain does not consciously adjust these levels. They follow rhythms shaped by evolution, responding to circadian cycles and the body's need for restoration. In this chemical state, communication within the brain becomes more flexible, less hierarchical, allowing regions that rarely interact directly during waking life to exchange information freely. This internal freedom is essential to dreaming because it allows memory, emotion, and perception to blend seamlessly, creating experiences that feel coherent even when they lack structure. The chemistry of dreaming does not create specific images or narratives. It creates the conditions in which they can arise. Dreams emerge naturally from this environment, shaped by the balance of chemicals that support exploration rather than control, imagination rather than evaluation. And it is this quiet chemical choreography that underlies every dream, guiding the mind through experiences that feel effortless, fluid, and strangely real, night after night. During waking life, the brain operates under constant supervision, with certain regions guiding attention, correcting errors, and maintaining coherence. But during dreaming, this hierarchy softens, allowing the mind to function without its usual oversight. The systems responsible for planning, monitoring, and self-correction reduce their influence, not because the brain is impaired, but because these functions are temporarily unnecessary in a state where no action is required and no external decisions must be made. Without supervision, thought becomes fluid. Ideas flow into one another without resistance. Images appear without justification. This unsupervised state allows the brain to explore associations freely, moving through memories and emotions without filtering them through goals or expectations, creating experiences that feel spontaneous and unstructured. The absence of supervision also means there is no internal authority to interrupt or redirect the dream, allowing it to unfold continuously until waking or a shift in sleep stage occurs. This freedom is not chaotic. It is guided subtly by emotion and memory, rather than by intention or logic. By removing oversight, the brain creates a safe space for experimentation, where experiences can be simulated without consequence, and where emotional patterns can be explored and softened. Dreams rely on this lack of supervision to exist, because any attempt to control or evaluate them would disrupt their flow, pulling the mind back toward waking consciousness. In this state, the brain is not solving problems or making decisions. It is exploring possibilities, and it does so quietly, efficiently, and without awareness, allowing dreams to emerge as natural expressions of a mind temporarily freed from its own rules. Dreams rarely remain stable for long, and scenes often change without warning. Characters transform, and environments dissolve into new ones, not because the brain is losing focus, but because the dreaming mind follows a different logic, one guided by emotional continuity rather than narrative consistency. In the absence of external structure and conscious supervision, the brain allows one association to lead naturally into another, with each emotional cue gently redirecting the flow of the dream, causing transitions that feel smooth from the inside, even when they appear abrupt from the outside. A single feeling can reshape an entire dream landscape, turning safety into uncertainty or curiosity into movement, as the mind responds instantly to emotional shifts without pausing to explain or justify the change. These transitions reflect how the brain organizes experience during sleep, prioritizing emotional relevance over spatial or temporal coherence, allowing dreams to move fluidly between states without resistance. Dreams change because the mind is not anchored to one perspective, one setting, or one identity, but remains adaptable, responding moment by moment to internal signals rather than external reality. This constant movement allows the brain to explore a wide range of emotional and associative possibilities within a single sleep cycle, gently sampling different experiences without becoming fixed on any one outcome. Rather than following a story, the dream follows a feeling, and when that feeling shifts, the dream shifts with it, seamlessly and without disruption. In this way, dreams remain dynamic, reflecting the fluid nature of the sleeping mind, which is designed not to settle, but to move, adapt, and integrate. Dreams shift and change not because they are unstable, but because they are alive, continuously responding to the quiet signals guiding the brain through the night. Dreams are often remembered not for what happened, but for how they felt, because emotion is not an addition to the dreaming experience, but one of its central elements, shaping the tone, intensity, and direction of everything that unfolds while the mind is asleep. During dreaming, the brain regions responsible for processing emotion remain highly active, allowing feelings to arise quickly and fully without the usual moderation provided by conscious reasoning, creating experiences that can feel deeply personal and immediate even when their details are vague or fragmented. Without the balancing influence of rational thought, emotions in dreams are experienced directly, flowing freely and attaching themselves to images, people, and situations without explanation, giving even simple events a sense of importance or urgency. This emotional openness allows the brain to revisit experiences that carry unresolved feelings, not as exact replays, but as transformed scenarios that preserve emotional meaning while altering context, reducing intensity and increasing flexibility. Fear, curiosity, comfort, and longing may appear without clear cause, reflecting internal emotional states rather than external triggers, as the dreaming mind explores feeling without judgment or resistance. Dreams provide a space where emotion can move, shift, and resolve on its own, without the need for conscious interpretation, allowing the brain to regulate emotional balance gently and efficiently. The intensity of dream emotion does not serve to overwhelm, but to engage the mind fully, ensuring that emotional processing continues even while awareness rests. In this way, dreams act as emotional landscapes, where feelings are not explained but experienced, and where the mind can quietly integrate what it has carried through the day and beyond. As the mind drifts deeper into sleep, one of the most active regions of the brain during dreaming is the amygdala, a small but powerful structure involved in emotional processing, especially emotions related to significance, alertness, and meaning. At night, when the demands of the external world are absent, the amygdala remains engaged, not to signal danger, but to help the brain identify which experiences carry emotional weight and deserve attention during internal processing. This heightened activity explains why dreams often center on emotionally charged themes, revisiting moments of tension, connection, or uncertainty, not as warnings, but as part of a natural process of emotional organization. Without conscious control, the amygdala influences the tone of dreams directly, amplifying feelings and guiding the flow of experience based on emotional relevance rather than logic or accuracy. This does not mean dreams are designed to provoke fear or stress, but that they prioritize emotional clarity, allowing the brain to revisit feelings in a context where they can be safely explored and gradually softened. Over time, this process helps reduce the intensity of emotional memories, integrating them into broader mental frameworks and supporting emotional resilience during waking life. The amygdala at night does not create content, it highlights what matters. By guiding attention toward emotionally significant experiences, it helps the brain maintain balance, ensuring that important feelings are acknowledged and processed rather than suppressed. Dreams often leave behind a subtle emotional shift rather than a clear memory, because their purpose is not to tell a story that must be remembered, but to allow emotion to move, reorganize, and settle in ways that are difficult to achieve during waking life. During dreaming, emotional experiences are revisited in altered forms, allowing the brain to engage with feelings at a safe distance, reducing their intensity while preserving their meaning, much like gently turning an object in the light, rather than confronting it directly. This process does not require awareness or interpretation. It unfolds naturally as the brain integrates emotional signals across memory networks, gradually smoothing sharp edges and creating flexibility in how experiences are stored and recalled. Emotional resolution in dreams does not mean closure or understanding, but balance, allowing feelings to become part of a broader emotional landscape rather than remaining isolated and reactive. Over time, this quiet regulation helps stabilize mood, improve emotional responsiveness, and support psychological well-being, even when the dream itself is forgotten upon waking. Dreams do their work silently. They do not announce change, they simply allow it. By providing a space where emotion can be experienced without consequence, Dreams help the mind remain adaptable, resilient and open, maintaining internal harmony through the natural rhythms of sleep. Most dreams are not lost because they are unimportant, but because the brain, while dreaming, is not designed to store experiences in the same way it does during waking life, choosing instead to prioritize processing over preservation, allowing the experience to do its work and then quietly dissolve. During the stages of sleep when dreaming is most vivid, the chemical environment of the brain shifts in a way that weakens the mechanisms responsible for forming long-term memories, meaning that even intense, emotional or detailed dreams are often experienced fully and then released without being recorded. This does not mean the dream had no effect. It means the effect occurred without the need for recall. The brain treats dreams as internal simulations rather than events to be archived, using them to reorganize emotional and memory networks rather than to create narratives that must be remembered later. When waking occurs naturally, without interruption, the transition from dream to awareness is smooth, and the internal experience fades quickly, much like a thought that disappeared the moment attention shifts elsewhere. Dreams are most easily remembered when waking happens suddenly, during or immediately after a dream, because the memory systems briefly reactivate, capturing fragments before they dissolve, not because the dream was stronger, but because the timing allowed it to be recorded. Even then, what is remembered is rarely complete, often reduced to a feeling, an image, or a vague storyline, while most details vanish, having already served their purpose internally. Forgetting dreams is not a failure of memory. It is part of the design. If every dream were stored with clarity, the mind would quickly become overwhelmed, blurring the boundary between internal simulation and lived experience, disrupting emotional balance rather than supporting it. By allowing dreams to fade, the brain protects clarity, ensuring that emotional processing can occur without adding unnecessary cognitive weight to waking life. Dreams leave traces, not records. They influence mood, perception, and emotional tone quietly, without demanding attention or analysis. And in this way, forgetting becomes not a loss, but a form of completion, allowing the mind to move forward refreshed, balanced, and ready for the day ahead. When a dream disappears from memory, it can feel as though nothing remains, as if the experience simply vanished without leaving a trace. But in reality, forgetting a dream does not mean the brain has discarded its work, because the purpose of dreaming is not remembrance, but transformation, and that transformation often continues quietly beneath awareness long after the images are gone. The brain does not treat dreams as stories meant to be recalled later. It treats them as internal processes, similar to digestion or cellular repair, where the outcome matters more than the details, and where the results are integrated subtly into the system rather than stored as conscious memories. When a dream fades, what remains is not the narrative, but the effect. A shift in emotional tone, a softening of intensity, a quiet reorganization of associations. These changes are difficult to notice because they do not announce themselves, but they influence how the mind responds the next day, how certain memories feel when recalled, and how emotions surface or settle in response to familiar situations. Dreams work below the level of conscious attention, adjusting the emotional weight of experiences gently rebalancing internal networks so that waking life can continue without becoming overloaded by unresolved feeling. This is why it is possible to wake feeling calmer without knowing why, or slightly unsettled without recalling a specific dream, because the emotional processing has already occurred, leaving behind only its consequences. The brain does not need you to remember a dream for it to be effective. In fact, remembering too much could interfere with the process, pulling emotional material back into conscious thought before it has fully integrated. As sleep cycles repeat through the night, the brain revisits different emotional and memory networks, not to replay events, but to adjust how they are connected, gradually weaving experiences into a more stable and flexible internal structure. Each dream contributes a small adjustment, barely noticeable on its own, but meaningful when accumulated over time, supporting emotional regulation, learning, and psychological resilience. The absence of memory allows this process to remain efficient, preventing the mind from becoming cluttered with internal simulations that no longer serve a purpose once their work is done. Dreams leave behind impressions rather than images. They shape feeling rather than thought. They influence readiness rather than understanding. In this way, forgetting is not an error, but a boundary, protecting waking consciousness from internal processes that do not need to be examined to be effective. What remains after a dream fades is not emptiness, but balance, quietly restored through mechanisms that operate best when they remain unnoticed. Dreams do not ask to be remembered. They ask only to be allowed to happen. And when they are finished, they step aside, leaving the mind subtly changed, prepared to face the world again with slightly less emotional weight, slightly more flexibility, and a quiet sense of continuity that makes waking life feel manageable. Dreams have followed humanity for as long as humans have been able to reflect on their own thoughts, and because of this long companionship, dreams have often been given meanings that reach far beyond what they are designed to do, turning natural mental processes into symbols, warnings, prophecies, or messages that must be decoded in order to be understood. Yet from a scientific perspective, understanding dreams begins not with what they might represent, but with clearly recognizing what they are not. Because many misunderstandings about dreaming come from expectations that dreams were never meant to fulfill. Dreams are not messages sent from an external source. They are not instructions delivered by the mind. They are not puzzles designed to be solved. The dreaming brain does not sit down with an intention, a theme, or a conclusion in mind. It does not attempt to communicate in symbols, nor does it hide meanings behind metaphors that require interpretation. Instead, it engages in internal activity that unfolds automatically, guided by biology rather than purpose, shaped by emotion rather than narrative, and driven by association rather than intention. One of the most common misconceptions about dreams is that they must mean something specific, that every image represents a hidden truth, or that every event points toward a message waiting to be uncovered. This belief is understandable, because dreams often feel significant, emotional, or strangely familiar, but significance does not require intention. And emotional weight does not imply symbolic design. When the brain is asleep, it is not trying to communicate with the waking mind. It is trying to regulate itself. Dreams do not predict the future. They do not warn of upcoming events. They do not reveal hidden desires in a coded language. Any resemblance between dreams and future outcomes is coincidence shaped by probability, memory bias, and emotional relevance, not foresight or insight. The brain is excellent at noticing patterns after the fact, especially when emotion is involved. And dreams, because they are vivid and unusual, are especially easy to retroactively connect to later events. This does not make dreams mysterious or supernatural. It makes the human mind extremely good at storytelling. Dreams are also not rehearsals for specific real-world actions, even though they may contain familiar situations, challenges, or social interactions. While the brain does simulate experience during sleep, it does so in a broad, exploratory way, not in a targeted or instructional manner. There is no lesson being taught, no plan being refined, and no outcome being optimized. The dreaming mind does not correct mistakes. It does not improve performance. It does not practice for tomorrow. Instead, it allows experience to be reprocessed without consequence, letting emotion and memory interact freely in ways that are not constrained by goals or expectations. Another misunderstanding is the idea that disturbing or uncomfortable dreams indicate unresolved problems that must be consciously addressed. While dreams often involve emotional material, their presence does not mean something is wrong, nor does it mean the dreamer has failed to process an experience properly. In fact, emotionally intense dreams often indicate that the brain is actively processing, not that it is stuck. Just as physical discomfort during exercise does not mean the body is being harmed, emotional intensity during dreams does not mean the mind is broken. It often means the system is working. Dreams are also not reflections of personality, morality, or hidden intentions. The actions taken within dreams do not represent choices, values, or desires in the waking world, because the brain regions responsible for ethical judgment, impulse control, and self-reflection are largely inactive during dreaming. A dream self is not a moral agent. It does not choose in the way the waking self does. It reacts. This distinction matters because assigning meaning to dream behavior can create unnecessary concern, guilt, or confusion, especially when dreams involve actions that feel out of character or emotionally unsettling. The dreaming mind is not expressing who you are. It is exploring how experiences connect. Dreams are not random noise, but they are also not deliberate messages. They exist in a middle space, shaped by structure but not intention, guided by biology rather than meaning. Understanding what dreams are not allows them to be seen more clearly for what they are, a natural consequence of how the brain manages memory, emotion, and association during sleep. When dreams are freed from the burden of interpretation, they lose none of their depth, but gain clarity. They no longer demand explanation. They no longer require translation. They simply become what they have always been, quiet internal experiences unfolding for their own purpose and ending when that purpose has been fulfilled. When people wake from a dream and search immediately for meaning, they are often responding not to the content of the dream itself, but to the emotional residue it leaves behind, because the mind is naturally inclined to explain feelings by attaching them to stories, even when those stories were never meant to exist in the first place. Dreams feel meaningful because they engage the same emotional systems that give importance to real experiences, and when those systems are activated, the waking mind assumes there must be a message, a lesson, or an insight hidden somewhere inside the imagery. Yet emotional intensity does not require intention, and significance does not require design. The dreaming brain does not construct symbols in order to communicate ideas. It constructs experiences in order to regulate internal states. When a dream contains familiar people, places, or situations, the mind often assumes these elements must represent something else, but in most cases they appear simply because they are emotionally accessible building materials, not because they are symbolic stand-ins for abstract concepts. A person appearing in a dream does not necessarily represent that person, nor does it represent a hidden aspect of the self. It represents a memory network that was emotionally active at the time the dream was formed. Meaning is often assigned after waking, not during the dream, because the waking mind seeks coherence, explanation, and narrative closure, qualities that dreaming deliberately abandons in favour of flexibility and emotional flow. This tendency to interpret is amplified by memory bias. Dreams that feel ordinary are quickly forgotten, while dreams that feel emotional or unusual are remembered and examined, creating the illusion that dreams are consistently meaningful, when in reality most dreaming activity passes unnoticed and unexamined. The human mind is skilled at finding patterns, especially when emotion is involved, and this skill, while useful in waking life, can mislead when applied to dreams, turning neutral internal processes into stories that feel intentional but are not. This does not mean dreams are meaningless. It means their meaning is functional rather than symbolic. Dreams do not convey information in the way language does. They influence internal balance in ways that do not translate cleanly into conscious understanding. Much like the immune system protects the body without explaining its actions. When meaning is sought too aggressively, dreams can become sources of confusion rather than clarity, pulling emotional material back into conscious awareness before it has fully settled, interfering with the quiet work the brain performs during sleep. Understanding dreams does not require interpretation. It requires acceptance. By allowing dreams to exist without explanation, the waking mind gives space for their effects to integrate naturally, without forcing them into narratives they were never meant to support. Dreams are not riddles, they are processes. And when they are allowed to remain processes rather than stories, they continue to support emotional balance quietly, efficiently, and without demand. Dreaming exists not as a side effect of sleep, but as an integral part of how the brain maintains balance over time, quietly supporting emotional regulation, memory integration, and cognitive flexibility in ways that do not require conscious awareness or deliberate effort. During waking life, the brain is constantly responding to the environment, making decisions, filtering information, and managing attention, leaving little room for deep internal reorganization, which is why sleep creates a protected state, where this internal work can continue without interruption. Dreaming emerges within this protected state as a natural extension of the brain's need to process, experience, allowing memories to be revisited, emotions to be softened, and associations to be reshaped without the constraints of logic, urgency, or external consequence. Rather than serving a single purpose, dreaming supports multiple overlapping functions, each contributing subtly to mental stability even when the dream itself is forgotten. One of these functions is emotional regulation. By reactivating emotional memories in altered contexts, dreams allow the brain to reduce emotional intensity over time, making experiences easier to recall without triggering the same level of reaction, which helps maintain emotional balance during waking hours. Another function lies in memory integration. Dreams help weave new experiences into existing memory networks, allowing learning to become more flexible and adaptive, not by reinforcing exact details, but by strengthening relationships between ideas, emotions, and concepts. Dreaming also supports cognitive flexibility, allowing the brain to explore alternative connections and perspectives without commitment, enhancing creativity and problem-solving indirectly, even when no solution appears explicitly in the dream. Importantly, dreaming does not aim for efficiency or clarity. It aims for balance. The brain does not need dreams to be remembered to benefit from them, just as the body does not need awareness of cellular repair to heal, because the value of dreaming lies in the process itself, not in its output. Through repeated cycles each night, dreams gradually shape the internal landscape of the mind, smoothing emotional edges, redistributing mental weight, and maintaining a state of readiness that supports waking life without drawing attention to itself. Dreaming is not a message, it is maintenance, a quiet, ongoing process that allows the mind to remain adaptable, resilient, and open night after night, whether we notice it or not. Dreaming works quietly, without instruction and without feedback, much like other maintenance processes in the body that operate best when they are uninterrupted, because the brain, like any complex system, requires regular periods of internal adjustment to remain stable over time. Throughout the day, experiences accumulate. Emotions attach themselves to memories. Attention is pulled in many directions. Small stresses layer on top of one another, often without being resolved in the moment. Dreaming provides a space where this accumulated material can be revisited without pressure, allowing the brain to redistribute emotional weight, loosen rigid associations, and prevent experiences from becoming fixed in ways that limit flexibility or resilience. Rather than focusing on specific events, the dreaming brain works at the level of patterns, gently adjusting how emotions connect to memories and how memories relate to one another, ensuring that no single experience dominates the internal landscape. This process helps prevent,
trained in the classical tradition.
On rare occasions, the boundary that usually separates dreaming from waking awareness becomes thin, allowing a quiet form of recognition to emerge within the dream itself. A moment when the mind realizes it is dreaming while remaining fully inside the experience. This state, known as lucid dreaming, does not represent a different kind of dream, but a different balance of awareness, where certain regions of the brain associated with self-reflection and monitoring briefly regain activity without fully waking the sleeper. Lucidity does not arrive suddenly or forcefully. It often appears as a gentle realization, a subtle sense that something about the experience does not align with waking reality, followed by a quiet understanding rather than a shock. In this state, the dream does not disappear. It continues. The environment remains vivid, emotions remain present, and the internal world stays intact. But the dreamer now carries a limited awareness of its constructed nature, creating a unique overlap between dreaming and waking consciousness. This overlap allows some degree of choice or direction, not because the dream becomes controlled, but because awareness introduces a new layer of engagement, allowing the dreamer to observe or interact with the experience differently. Lucid dreaming is fragile. Too much awareness can cause waking. Too little allows the dream to return to its usual flow. The brain maintains this state briefly, balancing activation and rest, exploration and control, without fully committing to either. Lucid dreams reveal something important about dreaming itself, not as a separate phenomenon, but as a reminder that dreaming and waking are not opposites, but points along a spectrum of awareness shaped by brain activity. They show that dreams are not sealed worlds, but flexible states, capable of shifting subtly depending on how awareness is distributed. Lucidity does not change the purpose of dreaming. It simply changes how it is experienced. And when it fades, the dream continues its quiet work, whether remembered or not, carrying the mind gently toward waking once more. Lucid dreaming remains relatively rare, not because the mind is incapable of awareness during sleep, but because the conditions required for lucidity sit in a narrow space between two opposing states, one that favors rest and surrender, and another that favors monitoring and control. For most of the night, the brain prioritizes deep rest and internal processing, keeping self-reflective systems quiet so that emotional regulation and memory integration can proceed without interruption, because too much awareness would interfere with the fluid nature of dreaming. Lucidity requires a partial reactivation of regions involved in self-awareness and evaluation, yet not enough activation to trigger waking, making it a delicate balance that the brain does not naturally seek to maintain for long. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. Dreaming functions best when it remains immersive and uninterrupted, allowing the mind to process experience freely without the distraction of self-monitoring or deliberate choice. Introducing awareness into the dream changes its character, shifting it away from passive processing and toward active engagement, which can reduce the efficiency of the underlying emotional work. This is why lucid dreams often feel lighter, shorter, or less emotionally intense than non-lucid dreams, because the presence of awareness alters how emotion and memory interact within the experience. The brain does not avoid lucidity out of limitation, it avoids it out of preference. By keeping most dreams non-lucid, the brain ensures that internal processes can unfold smoothly, without being reshaped by intention or expectation, preserving the natural rhythm of sleep. Lucid dreams still occur, often spontaneously, during periods of lighter sleep or near waking, when the brain briefly explores awareness without committing to it, offering a glimpse into the flexibility of consciousness rather than a default mode of operation. They are exceptions, not goals, and by remaining uncommon, lucid dreams highlight the importance of surrender in dreaming, reminding us that the value of dreams lies not in control, but in allowing the mind to move freely through its internal landscape. When lucidity appears within a dream, it often brings with it a sense of control, or at least the possibility of control. Yet this sensation can be misleading, because what feels like command over the dream is usually a gentle influence rather than true authority over the experience. The dreaming environment is not created moment by conscious decision, but by deep neural processes that continue to operate beneath awareness, meaning that even in lucid states, the dream maintains its own momentum, direction, and emotional logic. Attempts to control a lucid dream too strongly often cause it to destabilize, either shifting abruptly into a different scene or dissolving entirely into waking, because the brain interprets excessive control as a signal to exit the dream state. This reveals something important about dreaming. It is not designed to be managed. Lucidity introduces awareness, but it does not replace the underlying mechanisms that generate dreams, and when awareness attempts to dominate, the balance required to sustain the dream is disrupted. In this sense, lucid dreaming illustrates the limits of conscious control, showing that even when awareness is present, the deeper processes of the mind continue to guide experience, shaping emotion, imagery, and flow beyond deliberate influence. Rather than offering mastery, lucidity offers insight, a brief opportunity to observe how experience forms when control is relaxed, and how fragile the boundary between dreaming and waking truly is. Lucid dreams are not about directing the mind, they are about witnessing its flexibility. They demonstrate that consciousness can exist in many forms, shifting gently depending on which systems are active and which remain quiet, and that control is only one of many ways the mind can engage with experience. When lucidity fades, the dream resumes its natural rhythm, continuing its work without awareness, reminding us that the value of dreaming lies not in command, but in allowing the mind to move freely through states it understands far better than we do. When morning arrives and consciousness slowly returns, the transition from dreaming to waking is not an abrupt switch, but a gradual reorientation as the brain reconnects with sensory input, restores logical oversight, and re-establishes a stable sense of time, place, and identity, while the effects of dreaming quietly remain in the background. Even when dreams are not remembered, their influence often lingers, shaping mood, emotional responsiveness, and mental clarity in subtle ways that are easy to overlook, because the brain has already integrated much of what was processed during the night. The waking mind benefits from dreaming not through insight or memory, but through readiness, a quiet state of balance that allows attention to flow more easily, emotions to feel less reactive, and thoughts to move with greater flexibility throughout the day. This is why a good night's sleep can change how the world feels, even when nothing about the external environment has changed, because the internal landscape has been gently adjusted while awareness rested. Dreams help prepare the waking mind by redistributing emotional weight, ensuring that experiences from the past do not overwhelm perception in the present, and allowing attention to return to the world without carrying unnecessary tension forward. The effects are cumulative rather than dramatic. One night rarely changes everything, but many nights, over time, shape resilience. Dreaming also supports continuity of self, maintaining a sense of internal coherence even as experiences accumulate and identities evolve, helping the mind adapt without becoming fragmented or rigid. When dreams are disrupted repeatedly, the waking mind often feels less stable, more reactive, or less flexible, not because dreams provide answers, but because they provide maintenance, and without that maintenance the system becomes strained. Dreams do not guide the waking mind with instructions, they support it with balance. And in this quiet relationship between night and day, Dreaming fulfills its role, not by revealing truths, but by keeping the mind capable of engaging with them. After waking, most of what dreams have done remains invisible, not because it is insignificant, but because it has already been absorbed into the background of thought, emotion, and perception, quietly influencing the way the mind responds to the day without announcing its presence. The brain does not wake as a blank slate. It wakes adjusted. Connections between memories feel slightly different. Emotional reactions are often softened or rebalanced. Attention moves with less resistance. These changes are subtle, but they matter because they shape how easily the waking mind navigates stress, novelty, and uncertainty, allowing experience to be met with greater flexibility rather than rigidity. Dreaming contributes to this state by resolving small emotional tensions that would otherwise accumulate, preventing them from interfering with focus or overwhelming awareness, much like small adjustments made regularly prevent larger breakdowns later. The waking mind rarely recognizes this support because it is not experienced as a thought or an insight, but as a feeling of readiness, a quiet sense that the mind is prepared to engage without being burdened. Over time, this nightly process helps maintain psychological balance, allowing learning, emotional regulation, and adaptation to continue smoothly, even in the face of ongoing challenges. Dreams do not leave instructions behind, they leave conditions that allow the waking mind to function with clarity, resilience, and openness, without needing to know how that state was achieved. In this way, dreaming and waking are not separate processes, but parts of a continuous cycle, each supporting the other quietly, efficiently, and without demand. Dreams prepare the ground. Waking life grows from it. As waking life unfolds, the influence of dreams does not end at the moment consciousness returns, because the boundary between dreaming and waking is more permeable than it appears, and the mind continues to carry traces of the night into the day in ways that are subtle, gradual, and often unnoticed. The brain does not switch modes instantly. It transitions. Thoughts may feel slower at first, perception may feel softer, emotions may feel slightly muted or gently rebalanced. This is not grogginess alone, it is continuity. Dreaming leaves behind a state of openness, a looseness in mental structure that allows the waking mind to reassemble itself without rigidity, giving space for attention, emotion, and memory to align smoothly before the demands of the day take hold. In this transition, fragments of dreams may surface briefly, not as full narratives, but as impressions, moods, or fleeting images that dissolve as quickly as they appear, yet still contribute to the overall tone of awareness. Even when dreams are forgotten entirely, their influence remains embedded in how the brain responds to experience, shaping emotional thresholds, adjusting sensitivity, and softening reactions that might otherwise feel sharp or overwhelming. The waking mind often believes it operates independently, guided only by conscious thought and deliberate choice. But much of its stability depends on processes that occur outside awareness, with dreaming playing a central role in maintaining that foundation. Dreams help ensure that waking life does not become trapped in repetition, allowing emotional patterns to remain flexible, preventing memories from becoming fixed in ways that limit perception or response. Without this nightly adjustment, experiences would accumulate without release. Emotional weight would intensify rather than disperse, and the mind would gradually lose its ability to adapt fluidly to change. Dreaming prevents this not by solving problems, but by keeping the internal system responsive, allowing meaning to shift, priorities to recalibrate, and emotional associations to remain open rather than rigid. As the day progresses, the effects of dreaming continue to shape attention and mood quietly, influencing how situations are interpreted, how challenges are approached, and how connections are formed without ever announcing their presence. This influence is not dramatic. It does not arrive as insight. It arrives as ease, a slight reduction in emotional friction, a subtle increase in mental flexibility, a quiet readiness to engage. Dreams also help maintain continuity across time, allowing the mind to integrate past experience without becoming bound to it, ensuring that identity remains stable without becoming static. The self that wakes each morning is not recreated from nothing, nor is it identical to the self that slept the night before. It is adjusted. Dreaming supports this adjustment by allowing identity to loosen temporarily, to explore alternative emotional configurations, and to release unnecessary attachments, making room for growth without disruption. In this way, dreaming and waking form a continuous loop, each shaping the other gently, night after night, day after day, without requiring awareness or intention. Dreams do not guide waking life directly. They prepare it indirectly. They ensure that when consciousness returns to the world, it does so with a mind that is not overloaded, not rigid, and not fragmented, but quietly aligned with itself. And as the day unfolds, the effects of dreaming gradually fade into the background, not because they are gone, but because they have already been absorbed into the fabric of awareness, doing what they were meant to do. By nightfall, the cycle begins again, and the mind once more releases the world, allowing dreams to continue their quiet work, shaping tomorrow before it arrives, without instruction, without memory, and without demand. Dreaming does not occur as an isolated event within the night, nor does it serve a single moment or purpose, but instead unfolds as part of a continuous cycle that repeats quietly across the lifespan, shaping the mind gradually through thousands of nights, each one adding small, nearly invisible adjustments to the internal landscape of thought and emotion. Every night, as consciousness releases its grip on the world, the brain returns to familiar rhythms that have guided human sleep for as long as sleep has existed, entering patterns of activity that repeat not because they are habitual, but because they are necessary, allowing the mind to maintain balance over time rather than collapse under the weight of accumulated experience. Dreaming is woven into this cycle as a recurring phase, appearing again and again across the night, not always remembered, not always vivid, but always present, quietly accompanying the brain as it moves through different states of rest and activity. Each cycle of dreaming does not start from zero. It builds upon what came before. Emotions processed earlier in the night influence those that follow. Associations formed in one dream subtly reshape the terrain of the next. Nothing is wasted, even when nothing is remembered. The brain does not separate dreams into meaningful and meaningless ones. It treats them all as part of a larger flow, each contributing something small to emotional regulation and cognitive integration, whether or not the dream ever reaches awareness. Across a single night, dreaming allows the mind to revisit experience from multiple angles, gently rotating emotional material, softening rigid connections, and preventing any single state from becoming dominant. This repetition matters. Just as the body does not heal through one breath or one heartbeat, the mind does not regulate itself through a single dream, but through thousands of quiet repetitions layered across nights, weeks, and years. Dreaming is slow work, it is cumulative work, and it is patient work. Over time, this cycle helps prevent emotional overload, allowing experiences to be absorbed gradually rather than all at once, ensuring that waking life remains manageable rather than overwhelming. Without this ongoing process, emotions would accumulate without release, memories would harden without flexibility, and the mind would lose its ability to adapt smoothly to change. Dreaming restores that flexibility by continually revisiting internal material in altered forms, preventing emotional patterns from becoming fixed and allowing meaning to remain fluid rather than rigid. This is why dreaming persists throughout life, even as memory, attention, and perception change with age, because the need for internal balance never disappears, and the mind continues to rely on this nightly process to maintain coherence. Dreams do not aim to perfect the mind. They aim to preserve its ability to change. Each night the cycle repeats, not because the brain seeks novelty, but because stability depends on movement, and rest depends on internal activity that continues even when awareness fades. Dreaming keeps the mind alive to itself, and as long as the cycle continues, the mind remains capable of renewal, quietly reshaping itself through sleep, without instruction, without effort, and without ever needing to be understood. As the night continues and the world remains quiet, the brain does not remain in a single state, but moves slowly through repeating waves of activity and rest, each one marked by subtle changes in rhythm, chemistry, and internal focus, creating a long, unfolding pattern that supports dreaming without drawing attention to itself. These rhythms are not rushed, they are measured. They follow a pace that is slower than thought and gentler than intention. The sleeping mind moves deliberately, cycling between deeper states of rest and lighter states, where dreaming becomes more vivid, allowing internal processes to unfold gradually rather than all at once, preventing overload and preserving balance. With each cycle, the brain revisits emotional and memory networks from slightly different perspectives, not to analyze them, but to adjust how they relate to one another, ensuring that no single experience remains isolated or disproportionately weighted. This repetition is essential. One pass is never enough. Just as the body requires repeated breaths to sustain life, the mind requires repeated cycles of dreaming to sustain coherence, using each return to refine, soften, and redistribute internal material. During these cycles, the brain does not prioritize efficiency or speed, it prioritizes stability. Dreams unfold at a pace that matches the nervous system's capacity to integrate experience, allowing emotional signals to rise and fall naturally, without becoming overwhelming or suppressed. In this slow rhythm, the mind is given permission to linger, to revisit familiar emotional territory without urgency, and to release what no longer needs to be held with the same intensity. The sleeping brain does not seek resolution in the way waking thought does. It seeks equilibrium. By moving through these rhythms night after night, the mind maintains a dynamic balance, preventing emotional extremes from hardening into fixed patterns and ensuring that awareness remains flexible rather than brittle. This rhythm also supports continuity across time, allowing the mind to remain connected to its past without becoming trapped by it, and open to the future without anxiety. Dreaming fits naturally into this rhythm because it does not demand attention or control. It arises and fades in alignment with the brain's internal timing, appearing when conditions allow and dissolving when the cycle shifts. Nothing is forced, nothing is hurried. The sleeping mind follows its own tempo, one that has been shaped over countless generations to support rest, adaptation, and resilience. And within this slow rhythm, dreams continue their quiet work, not as isolated events, but as part of an ongoing flow that sustains the mind across the night and beyond. As the hours pass and the body remains still, dreaming does not remain constant in form or intensity, but changes subtly as the night unfolds, reflecting the gradual shift in the brain's internal priorities as rest deepens and then slowly prepares for waking. Early in the night, dreams are often quieter and less structured, woven gently into deeper stages of sleep where physical restoration is prioritized, allowing the body to recover while the mind begins its internal work without demanding vivid imagery or strong emotional engagement. Later, as sleep cycles repeat, dreaming becomes more pronounced, more immersive, and more emotionally textured, not because the mind is becoming more active overall, but because the balance between rest and internal exploration shifts, creating conditions where imagination can unfold more freely. These later dreams often feel longer and more complex, even when they are not remembered, because the brain is revisiting emotional material with greater openness, allowing associations to expand and connect across wider memory networks. This progression across the night is intentional. The brain does not place its most emotionally engaging dreams at the beginning of sleep. It builds toward them gradually. By doing so, the mind ensures that emotional processing occurs only after the body has entered a stable state of rest, reducing the likelihood that intense internal activity will disrupt sleep or trigger waking. Dreaming in this sense is timed carefully, woven into the architecture of sleep rather than layered on top of it, allowing both physical and mental restoration to occur in harmony rather than competition. As the night moves toward morning, dreams often become lighter, more fluid, and more easily interrupted, reflecting the brain's gradual return to awareness as sensory systems begin to re-engage and the boundary between internal and external experience grows thinner. This is why dreams closer to waking are more likely to be remembered, not because they are more important, but because the brain is already transitioning toward a state where memory formation becomes possible again. Across the entire night, dreaming serves as a bridge between deep rest and conscious awareness, ensuring that the mind does not remain static but continues to move, adapt, and integrate even while the body sleeps. Each dream, whether vivid or faint, remembered or forgotten, contributes to this larger process, adding small adjustments that accumulate over time, shaping emotional balance and cognitive flexibility without ever demanding attention. Dreaming does not peak once and end. It ebbs and flows. It appears, recedes, and returns, aligned with the brain's natural rhythms, ensuring that internal work continues steadily rather than intensively. supporting long-term stability rather than short-term insight. Through this nightly progression, the mind prepares itself not just for the next day, but for continued adaptation across life, quietly maintaining the conditions necessary for awareness to remain clear, flexible, and resilient. And as morning approaches, dreaming gently releases its hold, not because it has finished completely, but because the cycle is ready to begin again the next night, continuing a process that never truly stops, only pauses. Dreaming does not belong to one night, one stage of life, or one period of rest, but stretches quietly across the entire human lifespan, beginning before language forms and continuing long after memory begins to fade, adapting its role subtly as the brain itself changes over time. From early childhood, when the mind is still learning how to organize experience, dreaming plays a foundational role, allowing sensations, emotions, and impressions to be integrated before they can be named or understood, supporting development without requiring awareness or intention. In these early years, dreams are often rich in sensation and emotion, not because the child's mind is more imaginative, but because dreaming mirrors the way the brain is learning to connect experience without rigid structure, building flexibility before logic fully takes hold. As the brain matures, dreaming evolves with it, shifting focus from raw sensory integration toward emotional regulation, memory consolidation, and identity continuity, quietly adapting its function as cognitive demands change. Throughout adulthood, dreaming remains constant in presence but flexible in emphasis, responding to stress, novelty, and emotional load by adjusting how internal material is processed, ensuring that the mind remains adaptable rather than overwhelmed. During periods of significant change, dreams may become more intense or frequent, not as messages or warnings, but as signs that the brain is actively reorganizing itself in response to new emotional landscapes. When life becomes repetitive or emotionally stable, dreams often soften, becoming less vivid or less noticeable, reflecting a mind that requires less active rebalancing to maintain equilibrium. In later life, as memory systems change and external demands decrease, dreaming continues its quiet work, even as recall becomes less reliable, supporting emotional regulation and continuity of self without relying on conscious awareness. The presence of dreams does not depend on youth, imagination, or creativity. It depends on the brain's need to maintain balance. Across decades, dreaming acts as a stabilizing force, preventing emotional accumulation, maintaining flexibility, and supporting psychological resilience, even when waking life becomes simpler or more constrained. Dreams adapt to the mind they serve. They do not impose meaning, they respond to need. This lifelong presence highlights the fundamental role of dreaming, not as a curiosity or a mystery to be solved, but as an essential process woven into the fabric of human cognition. Dreaming continues even when it's forgotten, even when it is unnoticed, and even when it no longer produces vivid imagery, because its value lies not in experience, but in effect. It is one of the few processes that accompanies the mind from its earliest formation to its final rest, quietly shaping awareness without ever asking to be understood. And as long as the brain continues to sleep, dreaming continues to serve, adapting gently to each stage of life, maintaining balance through change, and supporting the continuity of experience that allows the self to feel whole across time. As days turn into years and years quietly accumulate into a lifetime, dreaming continues to move alongside time in a way that waking awareness rarely notices, not measuring moments in hours or dates, but absorbing change gradually, reshaping internal experience as the mind itself evolves. Time in waking life feels linear, marked by schedules, routines, and milestones. Yet during dreaming, time loses its familiar structure, allowing the brain to revisit experiences without anchoring them to a specific moment, blending past and present into a continuous internal flow. This timeless quality is not accidental. It allows the mind to integrate experiences across long stretches of life, connecting emotional patterns that may be separated by years in waking memory, but remain related beneath the surface. Dreaming helps prevent the mind from becoming trapped in specific periods, allowing experiences from the distant past to be softened and recontextualized alongside more recent events, ensuring that identity remains fluid rather than fixed to any single chapter. As time passes, the mind changes, priorities shift, and emotional landscapes evolve, and dreaming adapts quietly to these changes, revisiting old material when it becomes relevant again and allowing newer experiences to settle without overwhelming the system. This process helps explain why dreams sometimes revisit themes from long ago, not because the mind is stuck, but because emotional connections persist beyond chronological order, resurfacing when conditions allow for further integration. Dreaming does not age in the way the body does. It does not slow because time has passed. It continues to function as long as the brain requires internal balance. Through this ongoing relationship with time, dreams support continuity of self, allowing the mind to carry its history without being burdened by it, maintaining a sense of coherence even as memory changes and details fade. Dreams act as quiet bridges across time, ensuring that experiences remain connected rather than fragmented, allowing the self to feel like a continuous presence rather than a collection of disconnected moments. As waking life moves forward, dreaming ensures that the mind remains capable of adaptation, responding to change without losing its internal stability. And so, while time shapes the external world visibly, dreaming shapes the internal world invisibly, moving alongside time rather than being constrained by it, quietly maintaining the conditions necessary for awareness to remain whole. Dreaming does not rely on conscious intelligence, planning, or understanding, yet it displays a form of quiet intelligence that operates beneath awareness, guiding the mind toward balance without instruction, explanation, or deliberate control, because the brain possesses ways of organizing experience that do not depend on thought. This intelligence is not logical. It does not analyze or judge. It does not seek conclusions. Instead, it responds to internal states, adjusting emotional weight, redistributing attention, and reshaping associations in ways that support long-term stability rather than short-term clarity. When experiences carry unresolved emotion, dreaming does not attempt to resolve them directly. It allows them to move. By placing emotional material into new contexts, altering perspective, and loosening rigid connections, the dreaming mind reduces intensity without erasing meaning, allowing experience to remain informative without remaining overwhelming. This process is adaptive rather than corrective. It does not fix problems. It prevents problems from becoming fixed. The intelligence of dreaming lies in its ability to operate without interference, free from the expectations, fears, and narratives that often complicate waking thought, allowing the brain to respond directly to emotional signals rather than interpret them. Dreams do not require insight to be effective, they require freedom. By removing conscious oversight, the brain creates conditions where internal systems can communicate efficiently, exchanging information across memory networks without being filtered through belief or intention. This quiet intelligence is patient. It does not rush. Night after night, it makes small adjustments, barely noticeable on their own, but powerful in accumulation, shaping emotional resilience and cognitive flexibility across time. Dreaming does not aim to optimize performance or productivity. It aims to maintain balance. In doing so, it supports creativity, emotional stability, and adaptability indirectly, not by producing ideas or solutions, but by keeping the internal environment receptive to them. The mind does not need to understand dreaming for it to work. Understanding can even interfere. By trusting the process, by allowing dreams to occur without expectation or analysis, the brain continues its work quietly, guided by a form of intelligence that operates best when it remains unnoticed. This intelligence is ancient, shaped by evolution rather than culture, and it continues to serve the mind as reliably as breathing serves the body, without asking for attention or acknowledgement. Dreaming is not a mystery to be solved. It is a process to be allowed. And in allowing it, the mind remains capable of renewal, night after night, guided by a quiet intelligence that knows how to maintain balance without ever needing to explain itself. Dreaming continues whether it is noticed or ignored, remembered or forgotten, believed in or dismissed, because its function is not dependent on awareness, and its effectiveness does not increase when it is examined, interpreted, or controlled, but instead unfolds most naturally when it is left alone. The waking mind often assumes that attention improves function, that awareness enhances effectiveness, and that understanding is required for processes to work properly. Yet dreaming exists as a clear exception, operating best when it remains outside conscious involvement. This is because dreaming addresses needs that do not exist at the level of thought, but at the level of emotional regulation, memory integration, and neural balance, processes that rely on freedom rather than direction. When attention is directed toward dreams too aggressively, when meaning is forced or conclusions are demanded, the mind shifts back toward waking patterns of control and evaluation, interrupting the fluid state that allows dreaming to do its work efficiently. Dreams do not benefit from interpretation in the moment they occur. They benefit from space. By fading naturally without being pulled into narrative or explanation, dreams allow emotional material to settle where it belongs, integrated quietly into broader networks rather than isolated and magnified by analysis. The brain understands how to manage its internal systems without guidance, relying on rhythms, chemistry, and association rather than instruction, ensuring that dreaming remains adaptive rather than disruptive. This is why dreams often lose clarity quickly upon waking, not as a flaw, but as a feature, preventing internal simulations from competing with waking reality for attention or importance. Dreaming does not require validation. It does not seek recognition. It does not demand response. It operates quietly, repeating its work night after night, maintaining the conditions necessary for awareness to remain clear, flexible, and emotionally balanced during the day. The mind does not need to remember dreams to benefit from them, just as the body does not need to remember digestion to be nourished, because the value lies in the outcome, not in the experience. By allowing dreams to come and go without attachment, the waking mind supports the process indirectly, providing the space necessary for internal work to continue uninterrupted. Dreams ask for nothing. They offer maintenance, and in their quiet independence from attention, they reveal something important about the mind itself, that not all meaningful processes require awareness, and not all forms of intelligence announce themselves. Dreaming continues regardless, sustaining the mind in ways that remain invisible precisely because they are effective, night after night, without ever needing to be noticed. Emotions, much like weather, do not remain constant, and the mind experiences shifts in internal climate that are shaped by experience, memory, and expectation. Yet during waking life, these shifts are often constrained by routine, responsibility, and attention, leaving little room for emotional movement to occur freely. Dreaming provides that room. During sleep, emotions are allowed to rise and fall without consequence, changing shape, intensity, and direction as the brain explores internal states without needing to explain, justify, or suppress them, much like clouds forming and dissolving across an open sky. In dreams, emotions are not fixed reactions, they are fluid conditions. A feeling may emerge without cause, drift through different images, and fade without resolution, not because it was ignored, but because it was allowed to move naturally through the system, completing its cycle without being held in place by conscious thought. This emotional movement is essential to balance. When emotions are repeatedly constrained during waking life, when reactions are postponed or suppressed, the internal system becomes rigid, storing tension rather than releasing it, and over time, this rigidity can affect perception, mood, and responsiveness. Dreaming counteracts this by allowing emotion to circulate freely, redistributing emotional energy across memory networks, preventing accumulation and restoring flexibility. The brain does not need to identify or label these emotions for the process to work. It responds to intensity and association, adjusting connections automatically based on internal signals. In this way, dreams act as a form of emotional ventilation, releasing pressure gradually rather than allowing it to build until it overwhelms waking consciousness. The content of dreams often reflects this process indirectly, with emotional tones shifting from calm to tension to resolution without a clear storyline, because the goal is not narrative coherence but emotional flow. Over time, this nightly movement helps regulate mood, stabilize emotional responses, and maintain a sense of internal equilibrium that carries into waking life. Dreaming does not eliminate emotion. It maintains its mobility. By keeping emotional states flexible, dreams help prevent fixation, ensuring that feelings remain responsive to context rather than locked into patterns shaped by past experience. This emotional weather continues to change throughout the night, guided by internal rhythms and associations rather than external events, quietly shaping the mind's readiness to engage with the world again. Dreams do not predict emotional states. They prepare the system that supports them. And through this quiet preparation, the mind wakes not emptied of emotion, but balanced, able to experience feeling without being overwhelmed by it, ready to move with the changing weather of waking life. As the night reaches its deepest stillness and the mind continues to move gently through its internal landscapes, dreaming does not rush toward an ending, nor does it seek a conclusion, because the work it performs is not something that can be finished in a single moment, but something that unfolds gradually, patiently, across countless nights. There is no final dream that completes the process. There is no last image that resolves everything. Instead, dreaming tapers softly, easing the mind toward a state where awareness can return without friction, allowing the internal systems that have been active all night to settle into balance before the world reappears. As sleep lightens, the boundaries between internal and external reality slowly re-emerge, sensory systems begin to reactivate, and the brain prepares to reconnect with time, place, and identity, not abruptly, but carefully, ensuring that the transition does not disturb the equilibrium that has been restored. In these final moments of the night, dreaming often becomes diffuse, less structured, and more impressionistic, not because it has weakened, but because it is yielding space, making room for waking consciousness to return gently rather than forcefully. The mind does not snap awake, it reassembles. Fragments of thought drift past. Sensations return gradually. The sense of self reforms quietly. By the time awareness feels fully present, dreaming has already stepped aside, leaving behind no clear trace of its activity, yet having shaped the conditions under which the waking mind now operates. This absence is intentional. Dreams are not meant to compete with waking life for attention. They are meant to support it invisibly. The mind that wakes in the morning carries subtle adjustments made during the night, changes that cannot be pointed to directly, but that influence how easily attention flows, how emotions are felt, and how experiences are interpreted throughout the day. A slight softening here, a quiet release there, a loosening of associations that once felt rigid. None of this announces itself. None of it demands recognition. Dreaming works precisely because it does not insist on being seen. Across weeks, months, and years, these nightly adjustments accumulate, shaping resilience, adaptability, and emotional balance in ways that are far more powerful than any single remembered dream could ever be. The mind becomes more capable of absorbing experience without breaking, more able to respond without becoming overwhelmed, more flexible in the face of change. This is the true legacy of dreaming. Not insight, not symbolism, not meaning in the traditional sense, but maintenance. A continuous, quiet tending of the inner world, ensuring that experience does not harden into immobility, that emotion does not accumulate into burden, and that awareness remains capable of movement. Dreams do not tell us who we are. They help ensure that who we are can continue to change. They allow the mind to remain alive to itself, responsive rather than reactive, integrated rather than fragmented, even as life introduces complexity, stress, and uncertainty. And they do this without language, without instruction, without memory. Every night the same process unfolds again, not because the mind failed to finish its work the night before, but because balance is not a static achievement, It is an ongoing state that must be renewed repeatedly. Just as breathing does not end once oxygen has entered the body, dreaming does not end once emotional balance has been restored. It continues because the mind continues. As long as the brain sleeps, dreaming remains present, quietly adjusting, gently reshaping, maintaining the invisible foundations upon which waking life depends. And when the day finally begins, when the eyes open and the world returns, dreaming does not disappear completely. It withdraws. It leaves the stage without applause, without explanation, confident that its work has been done well enough not to be noticed. Tonight, and every night, this process will return, patient and unchanged, ready to begin again the moment the mind releases the world. There is nothing you need to understand, nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to hold on to. Dreams will come, dreams will pass, and in their quiet passing, they will continue to do exactly what they have always done, keeping the mind balanced, flexible, and whole as it moves gently between night and day, again and again, without end.